This video is going to look at neurons and synaptic transmission. If you look on the specification, it says you need to know the structure and function of sensory, relay and motor neurons. So we'll have a look at that. The process of synaptic transmission, hopefully you remember that from the abnormality topic that we did, including neurotransmitters, excitation and inhibition. So they're the key things we're going to be having a look at in this video. So here we've got a picture of a neuron. Okay, and nerve cells throughout the body are called neurons, and the human brain alone's got about 10 billion of these inside it. So when we start to look at them and we look at the structure of them, just think to yourself, there are 10 billion of these inside your brain. We've got three different types of neuron that you've got to know about: sensory, relay and motor neurons. And sensory neurons are the neurons that carry signals from your senses, so sight, smell, from those senses to your spinal cord and brain. So basically they're carrying signals from your peripheral nervous system to your central nervous system. So every time you smell something, the sensory neurons will be picking up that information and transporting it and carrying that impulse to your spinal cord and to your brain. The next neuron that we need to know about is relay neurons. And relay neurons will be allowing the two neurons, sensory and motor neurons, to communicate. And I'll show you a picture in the next slide of what a relay neuron does. But it's basically there to help sensory and motor neurons communicate. And motor neurons are the final part of the sequence. Okay, motor neurons carry the signal from the central nervous system to our muscles and make us move. So we'll show you a little flow chart here. So we get a stimulus. It might be you touch something hot. Okay, so we've touched it, we've felt some pain. The sensory neuron then will carry that information to your central nervous system. It will carry it to our spinal cord. And in the spinal cord, we've got relay neurons. And the relay neurons allow the sensory neuron to pass that information, that pain, onto a motor neuron. And the motor neuron will then carry the information from our central nervous system, from our spinal cord, to our muscles, and we move and take our hand off. Okay? So I'm going to show you a few diagrams now just to make this a little bit easier for you. So we've got our central nervous system here. So we want to pick up the plate. The message passes up here, up our sensory neuron, into our central nervous system here. Okay, and we've got our central nervous system right here in the middle, our spinal cord. And we've got a relay neuron right here in the middle. Okay, and the relay neuron allows the information from the sensory neuron to connect with the motor neuron. And the motor neuron will carry on and eventually initiate the movement that we require. So going back to the touching something hot example, I'm going to show you a diagram of it now. Again, trying to just clarify your understanding of what the different neurons do. So we touched a hot object here. You're touching a flame. You've done it by accident, obviously. And what happens is that information is carried down by a sensory neuron here. And the sensory neuron will take the information all the way down here, all the way down, up, down here, all the way up to your central nervous system. Okay, so we've got our central nervous system right here where we've got our spinal cord. And when the information arrives at the spinal cord, it meets something called the relay neuron. And the relay neuron is just here. You can see it in blue. And what that relay neuron does is it allows that information from the sensory neuron, from that pain, to connect with the motor neuron. And the motor neuron, what their role is it allows the movement to take place. The information carries on, goes down the motor neuron until it gets to the muscles. So, touch something hot. Sensory neuron goes to our central nervous system in our spinal cord. A relay neuron allows that information to be passed on to the motor neuron, and the motor neuron sends the messages to our muscle to remove our hand. Okay, so they're the three roles of the motor neurons, sensory neurons, and the relay neuron. And you've got to know what each of those do individually. So like you saw earlier, we are going to look at this in a little bit more depth in a minute. So if you don't understand some of the words in the table like dendrites and axons, that's absolutely fine. We're going to have a look at what those things are in a minute. But what we're going to have a look at now is, again, the three roles of sensory, relay, motor neurons. How could you structure this in an answer now? So the function of the sensory neurons is to carry messages from the peripheral nervous system to the brain and the spinal cord. That's its job, to carry information from the senses, is the sensory neuron, from the senses to the central nervous system, to the brain, to the spinal cord. Okay, and down here at the bottom we've got the length of the fibers, because you do need to know the structure of these. So sensory neurons do have long dendrites and short axons. And again, if you don't understand what those words mean, don't worry, we're going to look at that in a minute. They've got long dendrites and short axons. Relay neurons, okay, remember they're important for transferring messages from the sensory neurons to the motor neurons. That's their job. They transfer the message from the sensory neuron which arrives, pass it on to the motor neuron. Relay neurons have short dendrites and short or long axons. Motor neurons, okay, they carry messages from the central nervous system to effectors such as the muscles or the glands. So, information arrives from the sensory neuron, carried across to the motor neuron by the relay neuron. Motor neuron takes the message to the muscles and to the glands. Okay, and motor neurons have short dendrites and long axons. So some of you may never have heard those words like dendrite, axons before in the last slide. Now we're going to start looking at what the structure of a neuron is. So it should become a bit clearer about those terms. You can see on here we've got a lot of different words you need to know. Dendrites, the nucleus, the axon, the myelin sheath, axon terminals, nodes of Ranvier. There's a lot of different words that you need to know, and we're going to go through step by step what each of the role of these are. So the first thing we're going to look at are what are the dendrites. Okay, these little spiky bits sticking off the end of the diagram down here. And dendrites receive nerve impulses or signals from adjacent neurons. So they're sticking out, you can see them all little spiky because they're trying to get the information or impulses from other neurons. That's their job. Okay, they receive nerve impulses from surrounding neurons. Okay, we've then got the cell body here in the middle. And the cell body is what contains the nucleus. Okay, the nucleus is this middle round bit there. And the nucleus is what contains the genetic material. So the cell body is basically the genetic material for the neuron. Then we've got the axon. And the axon is this long part running down the middle of the neuron there. And the axon's job is to carry the impulse away from the cell body. So the dendrites pull in the impulse is at the cell body, and the axon takes that impulse away from the cell body. The next part we're going to look at is the myelin sheath. And the myelin sheath is basically like a fatty layer around the axon. Okay, it covers the axon and speeds up the electrical impulses that go along. Okay, it also protects the axon because it is like a fatty covering around it. And along the myelin sheath, you've got nodes of Ranvier. And the nodes of Ranvier are little tiny gaps. You can see them here, 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 and here. They're little gaps along the myelin sheath. And what that allows the impulse to do is basically jump across. Okay? And that speeds up the transmission of the impulse. So the impulse jumps across the nodes of Ranvier, and that speeds up the transmission down the axon. And finally, at the end here, we've got the axon terminals. And the axon terminals are basically there to communicate with the next neuron. And that happens across a synapse. And you should hopefully remember the word synapse from when we did abnormality. So this is a diagrammatic form of the structure of the different neurons. So earlier in the table, you would have found out some of them had long or short axons, long or short dendrites. These are these now in a diagrammatic form. So the first one we're going to look at is the sensory neuron. Okay, and the sensory neuron has quite short dendrites over here at the end, and also it can have a short or long axon. Okay, so the second one here is the relay neuron, or interneuron as it's called here, but we call it relay neuron. And remember, relay neurons have short dendrites again, and can have a short or long axon. Remember, relay neuron's just there to connect the two. And finally, we've got the motor neuron. And the motor neuron has the key characteristics of this long axon running away from the cell body. Okay, so these are the three different types of neurons that exist. So now we're going to move on to looking at the process of synaptic transmission and how neurons communicate with each other. Hopefully you remember a bit of this when we looked at SSRIs in abnormality and the biological treatment of OCD. So we're going to just run through a few of the key parts of a neuron that's going to be involved in this synaptic transmission. At the start here we've got the presynaptic membrane. So remember, pre is before, so this is the first part of it. Inside the presynaptic membrane we have synaptic vesicles. So these little bags here, and what these bags contain are neurotransmitters. Okay. In the middle here you've got the synaptic cleft, okay, the synapse itself. And eventually at the end of the process we've got the postsynaptic membrane. So these are the key words that you've got to have when we're going through the process of how synaptic transmission actually occurs. So before we have a look at the step-by-step process of synaptic transmission, we're just going to have a recap of what neurotransmitters are. You should remember some of the key ones from when we were doing abnormality: dopamine, serotonin. Okay, and these are chemicals that are released from the synaptic vesicles, okay, into the synapse by a neuron. And what they do is they affect the transfer of an impulse. So as soon as the neurotransmitters land on the postsynaptic membrane, that allows the impulse to continue across the synapse. Okay. A neurotransmitter is always reabsorbed. Okay, they're taken back up as soon as they've done their job. They're reabsorbed by the presynaptic membrane by this process sign called reuptake, and those neurotransmitters can then be used next time an impulse arrives at the presynaptic membrane. So now we're going to go through a step-by-step process on how synaptic transmission actually occurs. So the first stage is we get an electrical impulse travelling down an axon. And as soon as it arrives at the presynaptic neuron, then the presynaptic neuron will release neurotransmitters, so things like serotonin, like dopamine, into the synapse. And those neurotransmitters will be released from synaptic vesicles, those little bags we talked about at the start. So these chemicals now, the neurotransmitters, your serotonin, your dopamine, they move down the synapse. Okay, they diffuse across it, and they bind with receptor molecules on the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, so the neurotransmitters have moved across the synapse and land on receptor molecules on the postsynaptic membrane. Okay, and the receptors on the postsynaptic membrane will only bind with specific chemicals. So you'll have specific receptors on there for dopamine, specific ones for serotonin, and they will only work, those receptors, when that specific neurotransmitter lands on them. Okay, and as soon as it does, it stimulates the postsynaptic membrane or postsynaptic neuron, and an impulse is carried on down there. And once the impulse is carried on down the postsynaptic neuron, what happens is this process of reuptake. And the reuptake is when the neurotransmitters, so the serotonin, the dopamine, are reabsorbed into the presynaptic membrane and back into the synaptic vesicles. Okay, so once they've done their function, once the dopamine, once the serotonin have helped the impulse travel down the postsynaptic membrane, then they are reabsorbed back into the synaptic vesicles until next time when they're needed again when an impulse arrives. So we're going to do a series of different diagrams now just to clarify this process of synaptic transmission for you. So we've got here an electrical impulse arrives down the axon. Okay, you can see the small bags here of the vesicles, synaptic vesicles, containing the neurotransmitters. And as soon as this impulse arrives, the synaptic vesicles release the neurotransmitters into the synapse. And these neurotransmitters then attach to the receptors, you can see loads of receptors here, on the postsynaptic neuron. And as soon as enough of that happens and enough neurotransmitters land on the receptors, it stimulates the postsynaptic membrane, and the impulse can carry on down the next neuron. And you see here as well, you've got little enzymes that will destroy the neurotransmitters, that will break them down so that they can be reabsorbed by the vesicles, and that's that reuptake process I already mentioned. So this is the same diagram we would have looked at when we looked at SSRIs in the treatment of OCD. So again, we've got serotonin in here. The impulse has just arrived, so the synaptic vesicle releases the serotonin into the synapse. And from here, the serotonin will find their receptors on the postsynaptic membrane. So they're all going down onto their receptors here. And this allows the impulse to continue down the postsynaptic membrane. Okay, and as soon as they've done their job, that serotonin, they're released by the receptors and reabsorbed back into the presynaptic cell, and then back into the synaptic vesicles. And that process happens again and again. Remember, we've got 10 billion of these going on in our brain, so this process is occurring over and over and over and over again, continuously throughout the day. So, in the most basic diagram I could find, this kind of explains the whole process. So impulse arrives down. These guys here are your synaptic vesicles. They throw across the neurotransmitters, your dopamine, your serotonin, onto the receptors on the postsynaptic cell. Remember, these receptors only accept certain things. So these hands all coming out are going to be the hands for serotonin, grabbing those serotonin molecules. And then that allows the impulse to carry on down the neuron. So the final part that's listed on your specification for this topic is excitatory and inhibitory effects of neurotransmitters. So excitation is linked to neurotransmitters such as adrenaline, okay, and these switch on your nervous system. What it does is it causes a positive charge on the postsynaptic neuron. So when adrenaline lands on those receptors, it causes a real positive charge on the neuron, and this makes the neuron more likely to fire and keep the impulse going down the neuron. So that's what excitation is. Things like adrenaline that switch on and cause a positive charge on the postsynaptic cell. On the other hand, some neurotransmitters can bring about inhibition. Okay, and inhibition might be linked to neurotransmitters such as serotonin. And what these do is basically switch off the nervous system. So they cause a negative charge on the postsynaptic membrane. So serotonin lands on the receptors, it causes a negative charge this time, and sometimes that will mean it's less likely to fire and continue the impulse on. And what this means is these inhibitory effects will bring about a calming effect on the mind, okay, and bring about things like sleep. So we need excitation ones like adrenaline for emergencies where we need to get up and respond to a certain scenario. But we also need these inhibitory ones as well, because they're going to have a calming effect on us, bring about sleep. So they both have their own jobs and are both really, really important.